coffee infusion or something.
Yeah.
You know your mic's on.
Yeah. I'll turn. Okay, in order to make this logistically work correctly, we need to do something here. I've got to tell you, more of you showed up for this afternoon session than I expected. Maybe I was pessimistic, I don't know, but thank you for being here. But what this boils down to is I've got 13 sets of handouts. So we need to have people designated. Raise your hand if you're going to receive a set, okay? If you need to confer with people around you, do that, but we need to have. Okay.
We have a copier.
Yeah, we have a copy.
We'd make you some more.
Well, what am I worried about then? I didn't even think about that. Okay, let's just hand out what we have and everybody else can get them when they get them, okay? Now, what we need 8 people to go up and pick up each of those sessions. They're session 1 through 8. And just to keep people from being too confused, let session 1 be handed out and then session 2 be handed out so that
So these are already in order.
They're in order, yes. Yes. They're staggered there, yeah.
Oh, wait a minute. Okay. Okay, is it all?
Yeah,
it's-
yeah,
Oh,
like-
okay,
like
like
that's
that?
one, that's
Okay,
one,
two,
that's
okay,
one, yeah.
okay. I want to make
Yeah.
So how do I know who to give it to?
I don't know, wander around and give it to whoever will take it. I made it as confusing as I possibly could.
Well, that's all right. I'll make some more.
Okay.
For anybody that doesn't get a set of all of them tonight, I'll have them available Wednesday,
Okay. All right.
if you want to announce that.
I will. Okay, thank you to you who have been handing out these things.
Martha doesn't have one of her.
Okay, thank you to those of you who are handing these out. James says that for anybody that wants a full set that didn't get one right now, he'll have them ready on Wednesday night.
We'll have it ready Wednesday night.
Yeah. Now you need to initial each sheet and turn it back in for extra credit. Okay. So. Okay. Here's what I would like to do. I'm going to spend the greater part of our time. Yeah, I'm going to spend the greater part of our time right now just going over session 1, just to kind of show you how this works. And then we'll kind of thumb through the rest of it, and if there's any questions that people have, we can deal with that. On each of these sessions, on the sheet that says session 1, session 2, whatever, that is the instruction for the moderator or moderators. That's just to let you know the order that things are happening, and you go by that. That's not something that you would hand out to everybody in the group. But as you can see there, we kind of give the instructions that as people are coming in, we give them each a warm welcome. And when I say a warm welcome, understand the amazing step that somebody has taken to leave their house and come and step into a grief group. They have taken a major risk in their own minds. And so the second they walk into the group, they need to be very warmly greeted, not overpowered, but somebody needs to tell them how glad we are that they've come, and to give them a warm welcome and let them feel as at home as they possibly can. That's a very, very critical moment. It's at that point that we can tell them that we have coffee, we can have cookies, whatever, just everything to just make it as warm and friendly as we possibly can. In this instruction for session 1, have the room set up with chairs around a table. This last time with our large group, we had round tables. Now, how in the world do we do that? Well, we shoved a bunch of round tables together so that it was not exactly round, but we kind of sat around the outside of that. But having a table, I believe, is really essential, because for one thing, you're going to have handouts, and they need somewhere to put that. They need some place to put their coffee. And a table also allows people to kind of hide behind it. Okay? If you just sit out in an open circle of chairs, that's a little too much, that's too open. And so a table kind of allows people to kind of hide behind it with some comfort. And then we get down to the thing on introducing the session. We introduce each of the leaders. We tell about the daily procedures. The procedure is that each time we will be sharing some what we call expert information, just from different sources. And by the way, let me also say that if you choose to do this group, and you may want to look at this and say, you know, I think we ought to talk about this. And you may want to add a session, or you may want to throw out one of these and add your own. There's no steadfast thing here that says this is the only way to do it. It's probably the best way to do it, but it's not the only way to do it. We want every group to feel very comfortable with what they're doing. But we'll be sharing some information that we've gotten from other sources about their grief. And it's a worthwhile thing to share. It's kind of expert information. When I first started doing grief groups, I think we spent about 80% of our time passing out information, giving information, and about 20% talking. Over the years, that's reversed to where I think we spend about 20% of our time now giving information and about 80% talking, because people need to talk more than anything else. They can absorb that information even later, but we give it to them and it acts as a discussion point. We want to encourage sharing thoughts and experiences, but nobody will ever be forced to talk. Encourage them to talk, because that is what honestly brings healing. But if they're not ready, fine. Let them pass. You will be surprised in the group. You will cry together, and you will laugh together. And as sessions go on, you'll do more laughing than you did crying, okay? But there'll always be some of both. And there will be times that somebody will come in and they will have experienced something that is just devastating in their grief process. And they need special attention at that time. So we may set aside everything for a few minutes to focus on that person's need. Have you ever heard of the term being blindsided? In grief, what this means is that in the grieving process, you're going through your grief, and you may think that you're even past it. It may be months or even years down the road, and your mind isn't on the grief thing whatsoever, and then suddenly something triggers it, And bam, it's astonishing how powerful that is. My father died in 1979, and I think it was 3 years later. I don't know that I ever cried. And it was like 3 years later, and there was a television show, and it triggered it. And I just boo-hooed. Where did that come from? Well, I was blindsided by it. And this is going to happen. What's the strongest sense of memory? Smell. Smell. They tell us over and over again, smell is the strongest sense. And so you may not even be aware of what triggered it, but there may be just some scent that comes along that just takes you back to that relationship. And it may trigger all kinds of emotions within you. But it can be all sorts of things. But being blindsided happens. And it's kind of an interesting thing to talk through with people. When somebody is blindsided, we can open that up and say, has anybody else been here? You know, have you been blindsided by something? Because this is a very normal grief reaction. We want to also tell them that that setting is confidential. What happens in that group stays in that group. You don't go out and broadcast it to others unless you have permission to do that. But that group, they're sharing intimate details about their own emotional status. And so don't betray them by going out and talking about it. Not even to the point of, you don't need to tell other people who was in the group, because they may not want anybody to know. Now, if they want people to know, it's all right. But if you don't know for sure, you don't share that piece of information. What happens in the group stays in the group. We give a handout called Grief Support Ground Rules. Take a look at that. I did include that, didn't I? Yes. Grief support ground rules. We're all here tonight because we hurt. Different stories, different experiences, but a common hurt. Here are the rules. We want to encourage everybody to commit to be here all 8 sessions. No one will ever be forced to talk. Talking is what will help the most. Everyone will be given an opportunity to participate. The moderator will try to balance our sharing time. That's a nice way of saying, sometimes the moderator will say, let's hear from somebody else, okay? Tears are expected. It's a grief group. But laughter will also come, and laughter is allowed. It's okay. We want to respect everybody's privacy, so everything that happens here stays here, and cookies are always welcome. That's a very key rule at the end, okay? Now, that is something we actually hand out, okay? That's not just talked about. We hand that out to people so that they can see it in writing and they can take that home with them. We also want to talk about why their grief hurts, which is really the very focus of this this first session. Grief hurts because it's an undesirable major change in my life. Grief hurts because it leaves me with a hole in my heart. My grief hurts because I really love that person. My grief hurts because I look at myself differently now. That's kind of an interesting part. For many of you who have been married a long time and you're suddenly widowed, you're no longer a couple. And so you look at yourself differently now. And other people will look at you differently. It's not necessarily bad, it's just different. It hurts because others look at me differently. We kind of stumble and try to grab for a new identity here. Don't be in too much of a hurry, but it'll come. It'll come. Grief hurts because it's a loss of what might have been. When we lose a loved one, we have lost the future with that loved one. And so that's just a part of the grief that goes on, and that's why it's painful. My grief hurts because it makes me afraid of other loss. I feel for people, and this happens, but I feel for people who have multiple losses in a short period of time. But that happens. And it makes us really afraid because we begin to question every relationship we have and afraid of everything that goes on. My grief hurts because it makes me angry. And we don't want to be angry. But we sometimes get angry. Besides God, what might you be angry at? The person who died. Now, how does that work? Why are we mad at them? They left us. That's right. Be understanding here. That's a very real thing. And people go through this. Sometimes they're angry at the person that died, and then they feel bad about that. Kind of in the same way that they're angry at God, and then they feel guilty for that. Hey, this anger is just a part of the grieving. It's a readjustment. It'll come along. Who else or what else might you be angry at?
Your friend, because they still have their husband.
Oh, wow, isn't that a great observation? How dare they? Yeah, they haven't suffered my loss. Yes, sir.
Can we be angry with ourselves for things that we might have said or done?
Or not said and done. Yep, we might be angry, regretting things that we have said or we've done, or regretting things that we wish we would have said or done, and we didn't. And so we may very well be angry at self over that. Can you think of anything else you might be angry at?
Maybe angry at the whole world for just going on.
Yeah, how dare the whole world go on? Don't they know that it's the end of the world for me? And they're acting like nothing ever happened. Anything else?
I think we have to understand that those feelings are normal and natural, and not get mad at ourselves for feeling that way.
We should, yes. Now, here's a case where I think grief must be multiple times harder, and that is when there's a murder. Can you just imagine how that complicates everything?
We've had
Okay, it's devastating because as a Christian, you don't want to be absorbed in that. And quite honestly, it's nothing less than hate. We don't want to go there.
What about
But-
suicide?
Or a suicide. Okay, how about a suicide?
Terrible.
Yeah.
It's terrible.
Who does the suicide hurt? But everybody, every person that knew that person that committed suicide asks themselves, what could I have done? What should I have seen? And we question ourselves and we question everything. Great point, great point.
Or why didn't I recognize the signs?
Yeah. When in fact, sometimes there aren't signs.
Well, in retrospect, there were, Miss Steve.
Well,
I wasn't paying attention, I guess.
yeah. There are some things we can look for, but sometimes we just don't see them.
I believe suicide is probably the worst. Or no, worse than that is suicide of a child. child commits suicide?
I've had to deal with several of those.
It's hard.
And that's
Really hard.
devastating to parents. Devastating. Devastating to lots of people. So you can see, there's lots of things that people get angry at. That's why grief hurts. Because it kindles anger. And we could talk about a number of other things. Sometimes people are not angry at people. They're angry at the situation. Had one man that was just fiery angry at the American tobacco industry because he was dying, and it was because of his cigarettes. And those cigarettes had hooked him early in life, and now they're killing him. And he became a campaigner before he died. So all sorts of things. Why my grief hurts? Because I don't understand why God would allow this to happen. How do you handle that question? Somebody dies, and someone asks, why did God let this happen? Tough, huh?
I've been asked that before, but I couldn't tell you what I answered.
Okay, part of the complication of this question comes from the theology that everything is predetermined. Calvinism teaches predetermination. An uber Calvinist thinks that everything that goes on in the world was pre-planned by God. Is that true?
They don't give Satan credit for his power.
Okay, that's one element of it. Yeah, there is sin in the world, and God didn't intend for that to happen, but there is sin in the world. And there's all sorts of things that go on that were not of God's planning because God gave us free will. And free will leads to all kinds of complications. Now, it's actually an amazing freedom that we have. I think predetermination is just a sad theology because it doesn't accept blame for anything. It doesn't accept reality. It just says, and you hear it, well, everything happens the way it's supposed to.
There's nothing I can do.
Yeah, and that's absolutely wrong. Sometimes there are things that we can do about situations. Sometimes there's not. But this man who died of smoking cigarettes all of his life, you know, he may have blamed the American tobacco industry, but who was ultimately responsible for that? And that may have been why he was angry. Lots of things are involved in all of this. God wants for us what is best. And throw in this, no matter what goes on in our life, all things work together for good to those who love the Lord and are called according to his purpose. It does not say that all things are good. But in the worst of situations, there can be something good come out of it. In the depth of our grief, understand that God can pull something out of that that is very positive in your life. Now, it may not happen quick, but God is able to do amazing things with our deepest heartache. There's a phrase in the Psalms that says, deep calls to deep. And it's talking about how we are just overwhelmed with the waves of sorrow. And yet, even at that moment, God is able to lift us up and give us something out of all of that. And then grief hurts because the future is less certain. We'd planned a future with that person or about that person, and now that's not going to happen. So what can I be sure of? Well, yes, sir.
to say, going back to that previous point, we have to get to the point, I think, that it's okay that I don't understand why this has happened. And I think of the book of Job. It's not that we have to understand all things. And there's some things we'll never understand. Why did this happen? I may not understand why God allowed it to happen. Job didn't either. But he trusted in God. And so that should give us a sense of, it's okay I don't understand because God's still there.
Great point. Job went through terrible sorrow. He lost 10 children. I used to make the joke that the only thing he didn't lose was his nagging wife. And then I was corrected by a mother who had lost a son. And she said, "Do you not understand? She had just lost her children." She said, "Curse God and die," because she was devastated. How did God answer Job? Chapters 38, 39, 40, and 41 of the book of Job are God giving an answer. And God never gives him a direct answer. He says, "Job, if you're so wise, you answer my questions. Where were you when I made the earth? Where were you when I put the Pleiades?" It's a star cluster. "Where were you when I put the Pleiades in place? Where were you when I made all of this?" And Job says, "Okay, all right." God didn't stop. "Where were you when I made all these animals behave the way that they behave? Where were you, Job? Why do they do this?" And God just peppers him with question after question after question. And finally, at the end, Job essentially says, "Okay, God, you're in charge, I'm not." And that was enough.
You know, Pat, his wife may have revealed been one of the first to reveal one of the stages of grief, anger.
That's a good point. Job, possibility, Job is the oldest book in the Bible, by the way. And that may be true. So you can see how this sheet sparks a lot of discussion in a group, and that's exactly what it's there for. There's another one, another handout, what you need to know about grief. I don't think I'll read through that right now, except to say, going down, you're not going crazy. Lots of people experience things in their grief and they think they're losing their minds. Let me tell you a couple of things that are just big on this, and maybe somebody in here has experienced this. You lose a loved one, and sometime later, you hear their voice. Have you heard that? Have you done that? Okay. I would say that happens to maybe half the people that go through grief. And evidently what that is, it is our mind reaching back and just so desiring to have a contact that we hear that voice. And for the person who hears it, it is as real as it can possibly be. There was a point that I got to take I've been to Russia a couple of times. One of my trips to Russia, my wife had a job where she was coordinating some activities with teens and parents and all these things. And she was under enormous stress one evening, trying to get everything ready for this huge thing that was happening that night. And she was just flying every which direction and really stressed out. And she heard me say, "What can I do?" Well, I wasn't there, okay? But she evidently needed that at that moment. And she said after that it was okay. I was glad I was so wise as to be able to say such a thing at that time.
And you were absent.
And I was absent, yes. I was only absent by about 10,000 miles, by the way, yeah. But a lot of things that we experience during the grieving process makes us question our own sanity. It'll make us question our own health as well. I strongly encourage people in a grieving process to go to their doctor and get a checkup, because you're going to imagine all kinds of things going wrong. Because what you may have just ignored before suddenly becomes an issue. Go ahead and get it cleared up. Make sure you don't have a problem. And then you can go ahead and you can move forward with life. But this grief time is just crazy. And it makes us feel like we're crazy when we're really not, okay? One of the other things that we do in each of these sessions is that we give what we call a refrigerator reminder. And that is, it's a handout that they're supposed to take home and put up on the refrigerator. After all, isn't that what refrigerators are for? And so we put things on there. We encourage this every week. I give them a refrigerator reminder every week to take home. Now, I will tell you that most of the time, I have given you all just black and white sheets, okay? Most of the time, these handouts I do in different colors, just for the sake of something different, okay? It warms it up a little bit. But particularly the refrigerator hang-ups, they're going to be hanging there all week, and make it pleasant for them to have. And in this case, we give them a thing on grief recovery that just initiates the idea that they are going to get through all of this. And then at the end of that first session, we pass around a sheet that I know I didn't need to do this for you all, but I just stuck it in anyway. That sheet, we ask for everybody who's willing to do it, we ask for their name and the best way to contact them. Telephone number, email, whatever. For one thing, we need to be able to get a hold of them through the week. If something happens and we have to postpone a session or something, we need to have a way to get a hold of people. But we also ask permission, and we give this to everybody in the group so that everybody has everybody else's information. And they start interacting, networking together outside of the group together. And that's where a lot of their real strength comes from. And they develop wonderful friendships. And interesting friendships sometimes that go cross-generational. In this last group we had some wonderful friendships develop. And there may have been 40 years difference in the age group within those relationships, but they were relying on each other. And so we put that out, okay? Any other questions from this?
Can you share that list then with giving the list, each one of them gets that list?
Yes, if they will give us permission for that, yes, we will do that. And they really like it. For one thing, it kind of reminds them that when they go to the group, there are other people that are depending on them being there. And that's helpful. Okay? Let me just show you a few other things in these other sessions, and we're just about ready to call it quits, okay? As you can see in each one of these, there is something specific that is addressed. As we said in session 2 and in session 3, there are what we call normal grief reactions. And those normal grief reactions go through a number of different emotions. They go through physical things and emotional things and all of this, just to let people know that what they're experiencing is normal. It gives them permission to feel what they're already feeling. They need that. And so that's what we try to accomplish in those 2 sessions. I will also say that on the first session, you're going to have X number of people that be there. Say you have 8 people, okay? It could very well be the next session that you have 10, and that's okay. It's possible that on the 3rd session, somebody else will come. But after the 3rd session, we pretty much discourage anybody else coming to the group, because the group has already formed such a cohesiveness that it becomes a little more difficult to bring somebody else in. It's not impossible. And if you've got a really good group, they will pull them in regardless. But that group's already spent 2 or 3 hours together in a real emotional bond. And so adding somebody later on is kind of a hard thing to do, okay? Handling grief and anger, or anger and fear. We have specific handouts for each one of those and what that means. There is this is on session 4. I think I want to read this, and then I'm going to pretty much draw things to a close.
Have you had more than one group going at one time?
No.
So
What-
this person that comes in at the 3rd session, you just have to wait till the next session.
Yeah, and we don't kick anybody out, but we just don't. We stop advertising, and we tell the group we're going to try to not add anybody else, and they understand by that time. And we only do 1 group a year. I think if we lived in the city, we'd probably do more than that. But 1 group a year is probably adequate. There was actually 1 year that we didn't have a group because we didn't have anybody. Nobody came. How does that work? I don't know. But then other years we have a lot more.
How do you advertise? How do people know that it's open?
We advertise it in the Clinton paper. We make flyers and we pass them out all over town. We notify the other churches, send them a flyer so that they can notify their members. I think this last time we did some advertising on Facebook, as a matter of fact. Facebook advertising is amazing. You can choose your audience, and you can cover, like if you would choose every resident in the city of Hinton that has a Facebook account, you can send a advertisement to them. It doesn't go outside that, just to them. And it's amazingly cheap. I mean, you can do an what is it, $10 or something. You can do a Facebook advertisement for quite a number of people.
Do you say to the first 15 that comes, or do you put a limit in the paper?
No, never have, because we've never been confronted with too large a group yet. Hopefully we're not, you know. But I don't see us going through another pandemic, so I don't think we're gonna, I don't see us going through another pandemic, so I don't think that's gonna happen. There are a few of these handouts that I think are especially meaningful. On session 4, there's one called A Bend in the Road. When we feel we have nothing left to give, and we are sure that the song has ended, when our day seems over and the shadows fall and the darkness of night has descended, where can we go to find strength to valiantly keep on trying? There's but one place to go, and that's God. And dropping all pretense and pride, we can pour out our problems without restraint and gain strength with Him at our side. And together we stand at life's crossroads, and we view what we think is the end. But God has a much bigger vision, and he tells us it's only a bend. For the road goes on and is smoother, and the pause in the song is a rest. And the part that's unsung and unfinished is the sweetest and richest and best. So rest and relax and grow stronger. Let go and let God share your load. Your work is not finished or ended. You've just come to a bend in the road. Isn't that grief? There are maybe other things in the rest of these handouts that if you have questions about, I encourage you to just give me a call, okay? Let me give you my phone number. You can write it down on something if you want it. I had to give you James' phone number right now. That'd be funny. My phone number, 580-445-8607. 8607.
Say that again.
580-445-8607.
We get the time and temperature.
Depends on when you call. Yeah.
As a friend, that you give that out,
you-
real friend. Time and temperature thing.
You may get a sermon. You know, who knows?
Pat, did you say that each of these packets, do you necessarily give everyone in the group all of these pages or just certain pages?
Within the group, except for the one that says what session it is, you know, session 1, session 2, those are each the instructions just for the leaders. But the rest of those, everybody gets everything.
Like everything in session 1,
Yep.
everybody in the group gets all these pages?
Yep, yep. So they walk out of there sometimes with several handouts. What?
Do you staple them or hand them out?
I usually hand them out because they go out one at a time. We hand them out and talk about them and hand them out and talk about them. Yeah. Yeah.
What role does those in the Clinton congregation play in this?
Probably the greatest role they play is our greatest advertising, and that is simply word of mouth. Because they've had friends who have lost a loved one, and they say, another grief group's getting ready to start. And they are I think they're our best advertising.
So you don't necessarily need a number of church members there to help facilitate?
No, as a matter of fact, I would be very careful not to have too many people trying to run the group, because if you have too many, it overwhelms the people that are there. I really think that we're kind of pushing at this time for us and having 3 people moderate the group. Because if you have as many people there moderating as you have participating, the people aren't going to participate. They're going to...
You don't necessarily need people there to serve cookies or things like that?
No. No. As a matter of fact, we kind of... There have been times, by the way, at the end of each session, we say, who's going to bring cookies next time? Because we encourage participation like that. If something happens and I don't get a volunteer right then, I may call one of our ladies and say, I need cookies. And we always get cookies. Cookies are never unwelcomed.
So if you're,
In any
if you're
setting.
there, if you're present, you're a part of the support group. You're not just there as a bystander or...
No, if you have determined to do a group, pick out 2 or 3 people that are going to run this group, and nobody else needs to be there. No, but everybody in the congregation should know about it. My guess would be that if you guys would do a group, your initial group will be primarily members of the congregation, or else people closely associated with members of the congregation. You might get more out of the community than I'm expecting, but the first time you do this, it's kind of a novelty. And a number of people might respond to it in ways that they'd never even thought that this was a possibility. I will also say that there are occasions, very few, in the probably now 38 probably years that I have been involved in doing this. I think I've come upon 2 cases that we would call abnormal grief. And it's something happens within the group and we say, this person needs help beyond what we can give them. And you'd recognize that. One was a man who came to a group and told us that he was having these times that he was blacking out. And he wasn't passing out. He was just losing a segment of memory. And he told us that the last week he had one of those sessions. This was when we were still in Oklahoma City. And he was driving in Oklahoma City, and then he woke up and he was in Florida. At this point, I said, okay. Yeah, this is something I can't deal with. There was another case of a woman who was severely depressed. I thought that she had just lost her husband, just lost him. And it had been 40 years. And that was a different case. That didn't require necessarily professional help as much as it did just one-on-one visit. But sometimes, very rarely, will you have something that you can't just handle within the group. I'm fully convinced you guys are very capable of doing a really wonderful group here. Anything else?
What did you do with the one that needed help? Did you just offer a referral and ask them not to come?
Oh, no, we would never ask somebody to not come,
Yeah.
unless they were a danger.
Yeah.
If somebody came in threatening themselves or threatening the group, yeah, then we would take a special action there. In that particular case, I was doing the group with a social worker, and I think she got him some special help. Yes?
What part did the funeral home director play?
I think the main thing is that he's comfortable talking about it, and that in small town America, the funeral director, during that period of grief, especially right at the initial part, he becomes very special to the family. And I know in our case, I don't know of anybody in the world that doesn't know Troy Lee. I did a funeral with him one time on the other side of Oklahoma. Took us hours to get over there. We were coming back. He's an antique buff. We stopped at an antique store. Driving the hearse, we stopped at an antique store, okay? And I was just kind of laughing about it. But it was in a town that neither one of us had ever been in. And we went in, opened the door, and the first thing I heard was, well, there's Troy Lee. But I think the major part is that he's comfortable talking about it and that people know him.
So do they just address questions to him? He doesn't actually participate in the materials that you're giving us?
Sometimes, yeah.
Well, who does most of the talking? If you're talking, how does he talk?
Well, we share things. Believe it or not, I do have to stop every once in a while. And he and I will share things, and sometimes I'll deliberately ask him to initiate, you know, to discuss some particular thing. I probably do most of the talking, but Troy is very capable of that. One of the things that we've started doing in recent years is kind of have an icebreaker question at the beginning, just to get everybody talking, and he almost always does that. And he'll ask just some off-the-wall question, and it gets everybody talking, and very often gets everybody laughing. It's a great way to start a group that's already kind of got a cohesiveness together. But you can see the information that we're sharing. This is not highly technical stuff. This is not highly professional stuff. And so anybody who has been through a discussion like this probably can encourage other people to talk about it.
Is this phone number you gave us one we can text?
Yes,
to?
yes. I do text.
Okay.
Not fast necessarily. I don't get this. I can get. Anything else? You guys are wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much for being here and being a part of this. Okay. James, do you want to do anything else?
Thank you, Pat. I told you this would be worthwhile, as you already surmised it would be. But we really do appreciate